Well, it's 2022. Back on the tracks. Here I am again, walking the Old Boonton Line. My plan is to walk the entire Old Boonton Line from Montclair to Jersey City, and then go back and fly all the key points with my drone. This line, the Old Boonton Line, was inaugurated in 1872, and the last train ran here in 2002. So it's been abandoned for 20 years, all the way from Montclair to Jersey City. Online, they don't usually refer to it as Old Boonton Line, except in news articles. Train aficionados, train buffs, they tend to call it the NYGL, which is the New York and Greenwood Lake line of the Erie Railroad. It used to go all the way from the waterfront in Jersey City to Greenwood Lake, New York. You know, for me, I don't really care about labels so much. I'm not really concerned about it. I'm more interested in just getting out here and walking on the abandoned tracks, taking my time, and seeing what I find along the way. And where I am right now in Montclair, it's mainly all overpasses up to Benson Street, Bay Street, Baldwin Street, and Ridgewood Ave. Approaching Baldwin Street, there's a mile marker with a W on it instead of a number, and I found out that that's a signal for the conductor to blow his whistle. I'm pretty sure that's the only W marker along the Old Boonton Line. So it's kind of unique. All the other markers are telling you how far away you are from Jersey City. The old stuff, the history, you know, all the railroad signals, the bridges, it's all interesting. So I like to learn about that stuff along the way. I already walked this back in 2020. I walked from Montclair to just past Secaucus. This time I want to make it all the way to the Hudson River, going through the Bergen Arches. Back in 2020, I thought it would be my last chance to walk the rails because they're turning this into what they call a greenway, which is funny because it's already a greenway and they want to pave it. People, they hear, oh, a greenway, I can ride my bike from Montclair to Jersey City. And they're like, oh, what a great idea. And that's it. They don't think any further about it. They don't think like what will happen to the animals. They don't think about that at all. They don't even know there's animals living here. This is an obscure pathway, and these animals are living in secret. What happens when this becomes a trail? They have nowhere to go. They have no out, and they're stuck right where they are, you know? And it becomes untenable for them to even live. My interest in these tracks is totally separate from any nostalgia, but as it turns out, I have a nostalgic memory here myself. I rode this train. After my parents died, I was going through their photos, and I came up with this picture of me and some of my childhood friends at the Benson Street station waiting for the Santa train, and then a couple pictures of us on the Santa train with Santa riding the Old Boonton Line, the same tracks that I'm walking right now. So it was cool to come across those photos while I was working on this project. And now the Benson Street station has been bought by private owners, and they really made it nice. I remember how it used to look before they came in. I think there had been a fire there. It looked really abandoned and trashed. I loved it. I always loved that train station. Now it's all nice. I feel like I can't even go near it, you know? Ooh, all sorts of downed wires over here. A lot of trees went down this year and took out these wires. I'm almost positive they were telegraph wires back in the day. So even though I don't like touching downed wires, I think they should be, you know, pretty unelectrified, hopefully. Baby's hanging right here. Booyah. You got yourself a piece of rubber. And then what I usually do is leave it on the track, get it on my way back. I love going over the Broad Street Bridge, looking out over Bloomfield. Bloomfield is a highly underrated town. It's one of my favorite towns. I used to hang out down here quite a bit when I was young, and have a lot of good memories, good times in Bloomfield. Very cool little town. So I like kind of lingering over Broad Street, watching the traffic. Started at Benson Street, and I'm headed to Walnut Street. And along the way, there's a bunch of bridges that are very low, and something that they really need to think about when they're making their greenway here is like, okay, we have these really low bridges. Do we really want to keep them that low? They've been hit by trucks over and over again. You know, that's another question. Okay, they're definitely going to have to repair these bridges because they're pretty rickety. Walking over them is kind of sketchy. So are they going to make them higher? Are they going to, like, what are they going to do here? How are they going to accommodate for the traffic? Railroad bridges are interesting because from the street they look so dramatic and large, but then you get up on top of them and they're just like a nub sticking up, or like these walls. One of the coolest bridges, that's one of the solidest bridges that you don't really have to worry about going over, is there's the JFK Drive, and then it leads up to the Garden State Parkway going through Bloomfield. It's kind of cool just to watch that flow. It's almost like sitting by a river or a stream and just watching the flow. It just never ends, never stops. You go there in the morning, it's thick. Go there in the middle of the night, there's cars still going all night long. It truly never ceases. The overpass in front of me is Williamson Avenue, and I'm gonna just check that out for a little while because there's a lot of really cool graffiti. I sort of watched the evolution of the graffiti under this bridge. There's a lot of graffiti wars out here where people get crossed out, people get covered over, and then if you do have an infraction where you go over somebody, they're gonna go after every tag that you ever did, and they're gonna cross you out every time they see you. Which, you know, when you're talking about graffiti, come on, are there really rules to this? Because it seems like a pretty lawless activity. But I am a fan of graffiti, and I do watch it quite closely. See who's getting up so he was getting buffed. You know, all that. This is mile marker 10, and that's right at Orchard Street. And right here, this used to be the Rowe Street station, and it was built in 1955 after the original Orchard Street station, which was built in 1891, was eaten by the Parkway. When the Parkway came through, it just cleared whatever was in its way, and one of those things was the Orchard Street station. So instead, they built the Rowe Street station, and that was in service, I think, up until, 2002, when trains stopped riding these rails. Even though the actual station is gone, you can still see the platform, telegraph signals. They had a really cool old railing that went by here. You can just see that this was once a busy, bustling train station. Another theme of the railroad tracks is sneakers hanging from power lines. And you see that at the Rowe Street station and beyond, all the way to Jersey City. It's really cold today, and I just came across this barrel fire. How convenient. There's a little fire there for me to warm my hands by. That actually felt really good. It's cold out here. I made it to mile marker 9, and I see that they have expanded the golf course, and that now you can't walk the tracks from Nanina's to Branchbrook Park anymore without going around. First of all, I hate golfers, okay? Golf sucks. I hate the game of golf. I don't like it. And to have them encroaching on my trail here, I don't like that either. So now that this fence is here in the golf course, I'm going to walk around. I went under the bridge in Branchbrook Park, climbed back up, back on the rails, and I'm checking out this bridge. The one thing about this project that I made sure of, and I started this tradition on my first Old Boonton Line walk in 2020, just, you know what, have fun. The world is ending, go out, do what you love to do, which is walk on the railroad tracks, explore New Jersey, take pictures, and write books. But the thing is, right, we're running out of time, because I can see, even though they haven't done any construction work on the Old Boonton Line here, they're surveying it, and that means that it's only a matter of time before things really start changing out here. There's this really cool building in Newark. Checking out all this incredible graffiti. It's just sort of a free-for-all spot where it's pretty safe. And there's a lot of wildlife here too. There's a small herd of deer that stay here a lot. I've seen them many times just in this one little section. And, you know, they're just eking out a living here. They're just trying to stay alive. it's tough for them. It's horrible to see them trying to survive in Newark, because Newark is a really hard city to survive in, whether you're a human or anything. I mean, Newark's tough. In the North Ward of Newark, one of the main attractions along the rails is the old Tiffany Silver Factory, built in the late 1890s, which has been converted into either apartments or condominiums, and now people live there. And they used to make all types of flatware there, forks and spoons, all the silver stuff that they had. They also used to make this really expensive stationery. I read about it. It's like $1 a page you'd pay for this silver embossed stationery. And it was all made right here in Newark. Now it's been repurposed and people live here. And it's pretty cool because it's just a great building. The turret is obviously a landmark around here with a lot of history attached to it. As I'm going into Newark from Belleville, that's when the World Trade Center starts to become a real landmark. From here all the way to Broadway in Newark, the tracks have been taken over by industry. Walking down Verona Avenue, a lot of people told me to watch out for this area. And it is kind of sketchy, I guess, but I didn't really know how sketchy it was until I saw this stolen pickup truck smoking out its tires just now. Yeah, Newark is popping off. Especially in the pandemic, it's just like, it's changed for sure. There's a lot more out here that's dangerous than there used to be. From Broadway to the Passaic River, the rails get elevated, and the bridges are in really bad shape. I went and checked it out, but I wasn't feeling too good about being there. I was hoping to continue walking and at least get to where it crosses over the Newark branch. I know the bridge there is not in great shape, but it was just so overgrown, and there was people with houses and dogs barking right next to me. I just figured, let me get out of here. I made it to what they call the Cut Bridge, known as the WR Draw, from Newark to Kearny. They call it the Cut Bridge for a couple reasons. First reason is that it's right by the Erie Cut in Kearny, where they actually blasted through the rock to make a nice level train bed going through Kearny, which is quite mountainous. The other reason why they call it the Cut Bridge is because people use it to cut in between Newark and Kearny. The WR Draw was built in 1897, and it's a swing bridge. Right now it's welded shut, and they have all this telecommunication stuff going across. so they couldn't open it even if they wanted to. A lot of people will probably recognize the WR draw from the beginning of The Sopranos. It's one of the highlights in the intro. You know, to me, that's so awesome that a bridge and a spot so close to my heart along the Passaic River, you know, right across from Rapp's Boatyard, would be included in The Sopranos. Past the WR draw, Rapp's Boatyard, and the Kearny Cut waiting for me. I spent a lot of time there hanging out with Mr. Rapp back when it was a working boatyard. I kept a boat in the water at Rapp's for 2 years. That was in 2012 and 2013, and I'm still working on the book that goes with that adventure. 2 years on the Passaic. I'm hoping to have it done in the next few years. It turned out to be a lot more work than I initially thought. Hurricane Sandy hit and basically just decimated the boatyard. There was a 9-foot storm surge in the shop. Everything was ruined. Everything was completely drenched, you know, and now, you know, it's falling down like it never was before. When I had my boat there in 2012, 2013, Mr. Rapp was still alive. He used to just sit there every day and look at his computer. It was like a little clubhouse for him. And he couldn't really do that anymore after Sandy hit because everything was so dark and wet. It wasn't a very hospitable place for a person who was in his 70s. The yard is cleaned up, the crane is gone, the boats are gone. There's still a tremendous amount of garbage and pollution there, but the boatyard still stands. I think nobody expected it to last this long. Reaching this section of the Old Boonton Line, it really ties everything in for me between my Passaic River adventures and my railroad adventures. They converge. Mr. Rapp used to tell me about the station up there. He knew it, the West Arlington station, but I never saw it in my lifetime. I've seen pictures of it. Heading into the Kearny Cut, I can see that a lot of the trees have been cut here recently by the surveyors, and they have survey marks. One of the highlights to the Kearny Cut is Kearny Avenue underneath. There's just a really huge bridge with all sorts of strange concrete formations underneath. The other interesting thing that I found, there's these little bugs, and I don't know what they are, if they're dragonfly larvae or what the heck they are, but they're like these disgusting little creatures living in an even more disgusting little stream underneath Kearny Avenue and the Kearny Cut. They're coming out onto Chestnut Street into Kearny. It looks like a fairly new bridge, but the concrete is just shearing off at the bottom and there's rebar showing. It's pretty bad. This bridge's not looking too good. It's just sketchy. Like, this is the state of our bridges, and this bridge doesn't even look like it's that old. So what about the ones that are from the 1930s? It can't be good. I'm just coming up here after Chestnut Street, the JC 7-mile marker, 7 miles to Jersey City from here. And this is the old Arlington station, where in 1963, 3 kids died at the Elm Street crossing. I think they went around a train while another train was coming, and it killed all 3 of them. Just bam, you know? I'm walking out today into the marsh. Beautiful day, a little bit windy. I came across this view of Newark where the garbage burner is going intermittently. The wind is blowing through the phragmites, and I just had to stop and take pictures of the 5 stacks of the Kearny generating station, the Pulaski Skyway, the garbage burner, downtown Newark, etc., etc. The view from here along the trail is amazing. I feel very privileged to have known the Meadowlands so intimately. I really have X-Ray Burns to thank for it. He always would tell me, oh dude, you gotta go walk out on the train tracks. I took his advice, his explicit advice. I had no idea they were the Old Boonton Line. I had no idea they were the same tracks that I was walking in Montclair. And he helped me tie it all together.
She remembers nothing until the cab ride the next morning. I can explain this. Why?
It's amazing how knowing somebody can change the entire course of your life. You never know who's going to come into your life and affect you that way. I was just incredibly lucky to have known the man. And he set me off on this trajectory that I love. Right now I'm coming up on the Route 7 overpass, and the tide's going out. So I'll be walking over this low rail bridge, and you can see the water just rips through here when the tide is changing. Right now the tide's going out, so hopefully by the time I get out near the Hackensack River, I'll be able to see the stumps of the Atlantic white cedar that used to be here. I'll tell you, the Route 7 bridge, I see that they're fixing it, but man, it looks a little sketchy. I don't love driving this way anymore after seeing the undersides of these bridges. I just saw this bag blowing in the wind, just sitting there under the Belleville Turnpike Bridge. Upon going up to it, it was nothing, you know, it was just like some debris. But when you see something like that in this forlorn place, you never know when you're going to find a dead body in a spot like this. There's a lot of really old railroad equipment out in Kearny Marsh, and a lot of old graffiti that hasn't been gone over. There's this one graffiti chick that I have been visiting for years. She's been here the whole time under this New Jersey Turnpike Bridge out in the Meadowlands. Coming up on the metal fence and some incredible views across the marsh. Unfortunately, the views are of the American Dream Mega Mall and Harmon Cove. Harmon Cove, okay, fine. People gotta live somewhere, but the American Dream Mega Mall is gotta be one of the most disgusting things in New Jersey. I'm gonna go there when it's abandoned with a can of spray paint. You know what I mean? Like, I would never go shopping there or anything. It was one of the worst things that New Jersey's done in a long time. And if that's the American dream, I want no part of the American dream. I mean, to me, it's the shallowest, worst part of our collective psyche is this consumerism and the price that we pay environmentally for our convenience. This entire area used to be Atlantic white cedar forest back until the 1600s or 1700s, when they started cutting all these trees. They'd use them for whenever they needed wood that wouldn't rot. They'd make boats out of it. They'd make all sorts of siding and shingles. And basically they decimated the entire population of this Atlantic white cedar, and all you see now are the stumps. Approaching the DB Draw, which is the swing bridge over the Hackensack River, and it's in the open position permanently. And which leaves me with another question: how do they plan on getting this rail trail over the Hackensack River. It seems like that's one of the most far-fetched parts of their plan. Like, how do you do it, you know? But I like to just sit here on the DB draw. A lot of times I find myself here at sunset, and I like to just sit here and watch the trains going over the portal at rush hour, watch the cars going by on the elevated section of the turnpike. I love coming out to Kearny Marsh. It's truly beautiful, even though it's been ravaged by humans. But no matter what we've done to it, it's still beautiful. That's perhaps the most incredible thing about it. It's beautiful in like a post-apocalyptic kind of way, you know? Even though the apocalypse hasn't even happened yet. There's a lot of history on Snake Hill. There used to be an insane asylum here, an almshouse, tuberculosis hospital, and around Snake Hill there's thousands and thousands of people buried. And when they went and they built the turnpike and the Secaucus train station and, you know, anything they build out here, they end up coming across all these dead bodies, all these really old graves. People who were in the hospitals up in Snake Hill. There's a lot of ghost stories about Snake Hill, which are pretty cool. Coming here at night is a little bit spooky. This is Laurel Hill Park, which I prefer to call Snake Hill. So I'm walking from Snake Hill out into the marsh in Secaucus. I'm going to try to get to the cemetery, St. Peter's Cemetery, which is kind of a link to the Bergen Arches. Coming up on this end of track sign. So this is where the tracks actually become live. And this train that's parked here has been here for a couple years. And the wheels of the train, they're all rusted to the track. They haven't rolled in quite some time. But then when I came out here to fly the drone, the train is gone. So that was kind of a shock. But that just proves, hey, everything's in flux out here. So you got to get out here and capture it while you can. Up ahead is Penhorn Creek. The water is so green here, it actually looks like St. Patrick's Day. This is a tidal pumping station. I don't know if it's an algae bloom or if it's some other type of horrible pollution, but I can assure you that it should not be green like this. This is also the inlet for what used to be the Hudson Generating Station, which has been recently demolished. I heard a story that when they blew up the Hudson Generating Station, it was at like 6 in the morning, and they didn't tell anyone they were going to do it. And Jersey City residents woke up like out of their bed, like, oh my God. It's a huge explosion that took down the entire plant. It was totally planned, controlled demolition, but shocked the hell out of everybody in Jersey City that day. Leaving the Hudson Generating Station behind, coming up on the Croxton Terminal where they park incredible amount of trucks, and there's freight trains going by, and just a lot of really heavy transportation industry. And I found out that that's how the Old Boonton Line connected with the Bergen Arches through these loops here by the Croxton Terminal of today. And there's this one little section, if you go off to the right, where the tracks split, that is so incredibly beautiful. It's really low through marshland. There's birds, and today there's ice. It's just a marshy oasis. And the sunlight on the ice and the phragmites is just blowing my mind right now. Today there's just this freight line that is unending. I don't know how far these cars stretch, but they seem to go on for miles. And I heard them pulling in here, and now they're just stopped. And I went to go cross them, and I saw this guy in a reflective vest walking towards me, and I was just like, okay, I'm out of here. So for my next mission, I'm definitely going to be starting at St. Peter's Cemetery, checking that out, and then headed down into the Erie Cut. Initially thought from satellite images that the strip of trees on the side of the cemetery would have the old tracks. I thought it would have followed around that way, but it's not the case. The path that used to go through the Bergen Arches is what the Dead Man's Tunnel is today. The Long Dock Tunnel is almost a mile long through Bergen Hill. They opened it in 1861, and they spent about 5 years blasting the tunnel straight through the solid rock of the Hudson Palisades. It's called the Dead Man's Tunnel because 57 workers lost their lives from accidents and cave-ins. One really bad cave-in, 11 people died in one shot. They were building an arch around the western portal, and I guess the arch and the ceiling collapsed and fell right on 11 people. I think 8 people got hurt too. And that was the worst of the deaths. The Bergen Arches run parallel to the Dead Man's Tunnel through the Erie Cut. It was intended to replace the Long Dock Tunnel, but ironically the Dead Man's Tunnel is still currently in service as a freight line, and the Bergen Arches have been abandoned since 1957. So sometimes things just don't always work out. The Erie Cut, or the Bergen Arches, was built in 1906 to 1910, and they dynamited out a cut out of the blue trap rock of Jersey City. It's a series of short tunnels and bridges, and it holds up the infrastructure above it. Walking through the Bergen Arches on a day like this in the wintertime, it's just freezing cold, and you can tell how cold it is by these stalactites hanging down. You think, okay, I'm just going to walk through this tunnel. It looks pretty short. By the time you get in there, the light just completely is swallowed by the darkness of this tunnel. You can still see the bright light at the end, but man, is it dark. You can't even barely see your hand in front of your face. That's how dark it can get in that long tunnel, especially. So after going through the Erie Cut, you come out under Dickinson High School. Basically, everything's changed from the way it used to be here. Now you have the viaduct for 78 and for the entrance to the Holland Tunnel. And these bridges used to be a shelter for the Erie layup, where they would keep their rail cars overnight. So during the day, all those rail cars would be in service, running the lines, ferrying commuters and goods and whatever. And then at night, they'd come back here to the layup and sit for the night. And now, of course, it looks completely different. You just wouldn't even know how it worked. Above the eastern portal of the Long Dock Tunnel, there's these stone tablets, and they have the inscription on there telling, you know, when they started it, when it was completed, and they have the names of the head chief executives who were in charge of the tunnel. But it makes absolutely no mention whatsoever of the 57 anonymous workers who lost their lives building the Long Dock Tunnel. It took me a long time to figure out exactly how the trains got into the Erie Cut and then out of the Erie Cut. Because the evidence on the ground just isn't there. It used to be 4 tracks coming out of the Erie Cut on a elevated viaduct, and they would go out to Newport. That was the Erie station, and then they would take the Pavonia ferry from the Erie station down to Chambers Street in Lower Manhattan, and that was the full ride, end of the line, or beginning of the line, depending on which way you're going. So you could go from Chambers Street, buy a ferry ticket, train ticket, and then wind up in Greenwood Lake, New York, wherever the hell that is. Leaving the abandoned behind, I'm walking on the streets of Jersey City, all the way to the waterfront, and all traces of the railroad infrastructure is gone. The only thing left is that one bridge over Monmouth Street. Right now, there's no pedestrian walkways on 11th, so I'm walking parallel with the ghost rails toward the Newport Mall. When I got to the Holland Tunnel entrance at Marin Boulevard, I decided to take a quick detour to check out the massive Distort mural depicting Jersey City and the Bergen Arches. The mural is huge. It's on the side of a warehouse. It's so big it's almost impossible to take a good picture of the entire painting from ground level. The best way to experience the mural probably is to just see it in person. Back on the track of the ghost rails, I'm passing the Holland Tunnel entrance, and as I look east towards the Hudson, these monolithic air vents for the tunnel are looming up. The Jersey City waterfront looks completely different than it used to. Rail yards used to dominate the shoreline from Bayonne to Weehawken, and all traces of that are almost completely gone. Right now the waterfront's either completely developed or it's in the process of being developed. And there's a pedestrian walkway along the Hudson. When I reached the former Pavonia terminal, I found that it's just a rotting pier jutting out into the Hudson. There's like some weird tennis courts on it or something, but they're collapsing. I really felt like I had reached the end of the line as far as the Old Boonton Line is concerned. And all I really needed to do was just get some drone shots of Jersey City. And up to this point, I've been flying my drone with no problems. But almost as soon as the drone was up in the air, all these seagulls got curious and began to dive bomb the quadcopter. You know, I don't want to hurt a bird. So I took immediate evasive action and just like dropped the drone out of the sky. Basically, just went home. I was like, all right, well, I don't know what I'm going to do to get these aerial shots for my book. You know, I really wanted to end my book with pictures of the Jersey City waterfront from the sky. So the solution came in the form of my wife, Sarah, who, after hearing my predicament with the birds, surprised me by chartering a helicopter flight over New York City that offered even better views than I could have hoped for with the drone. A lot more altitude, a lot wider perspective, and I was able to get a view of the Chambers Street ferry station in Manhattan, which was the true terminus for Erie passengers. It was also the true starting point. And then we flew over Manhattan, and I got to look back on New Jersey with the New World Trade Center, which had been my beacon for this entire walk from over the East River, looking back onto New Jersey. And it was just, it brought the entire journey into perspective for me. It was extremely cold being up there in a doors-off helicopter flight in the middle of winter, but it was entirely worth it. And these pictures that I was able to get from over New York City looking into New Jersey were just invaluable for finishing up my book, Walking the Old Boonton Line. It became the perfect finale for an amazing adventure. So by now, if you're watching this, it means the book's out and the movie is complete. And if you want to take a deeper dive into the history of the abandoned rails of New Jersey, then Walking the Old Boonton Line is the book for you. I want to thank you all for coming along on the journey with me from Montclair to Jersey City. This is Wheeler Antabanez signing off. Over and out.